You take a bite of a raw tuber. The fibers are incredibly tough. Your jaw aches from the relentless effort. For millions of years, this was your daily reality. Digestion was a brutal and exhausting task that demanded almost all of your waking hours just to survive. Why did your ancestors stop chewing and start burning their meals? Your hands are covered in dirt. The sun beats down on the dry earth. You have spent the entire morning digging. This single root is your only reward. It is hard and covered in thick bark. You cannot just swallow it. You must crush the tough cellular walls with your teeth. This process takes hours of constant, agonizing pressure. Does your modern jaw even possess the strength for this? You sit in the dust and chew. You chew until your facial muscles burn. You chew until your teeth grind down to the pulp. This is the only way your body can extract any sustenance from the harsh environment. You are a slave to your own stomach. Every waking moment is dedicated to the mechanical breakdown of plant matter. Your survival depends entirely on the sheer physical endurance of your mouth. How did you ever find time to do anything else? You look at your hands. They are completely unsuited for tearing raw flesh. You look at your teeth. They are tiny and blunt compared to any other wild predator. Your body is a biological contradiction. You exist as an apex predator with the physical equipment of a timid herbivore. How do you explain this massive discrepancy between your anatomy and your dominance? The answer is not found in your bones. The answer is found in the ashes of ancient fires. You are a creature entirely engineered by the flame. You simply do not realize the extent of this dependence. You think of cooking as a cultural choice or a specialized culinary art. It is actually a biological necessity that shaped the very architecture of your existence. When was the last time you thought about the immense power contained in a warm meal? Your digestive tract is surprisingly small. It is incredibly short for a primate of your size. You cannot effectively ferment large quantities of tough plant fiber. A chimpanzee spends about 6 hours every single day just chewing raw food. Their jaws are massive and powered by thick, heavy muscles anchored to their skulls. Their intestines are extremely long and heavily specialized for breaking down toxic, raw plant matter. Your ancient ancestors shared these exact same anatomical traits millions of years ago. They lived their lives perpetually trapped in a cycle of chewing and digesting. How did you lose the physical ability to process the raw, untamed world around you? The shift happened around 2 million years ago. A completely new type of human appeared on the African savanna. This was Homo erectus, a creature that looked remarkably like you do today. They stood fully upright and walked with a modern, efficient stride. They had noticeably smaller teeth and much weaker jaw muscles. Their rib cages were narrower, indicating a significantly shorter and less demanding digestive tract. What caused such a dramatic anatomical shrinking in a relatively short period of evolutionary time? Primatologist Richard Wrangham proposed a highly radical answer to this biological puzzle. He suggested that Homo erectus did not just discover fire, but fundamentally and physically relied upon it for survival. Cooking fundamentally changes the chemical structure of any food you place over the flames. Heat rapidly denatures complex proteins and breaks down tough, unyielding starches. The fire acts as an external stomach that digests the food before it even enters your mouth. Does this external digestion explain why your brain could suddenly afford to grow so large? Your brain is an absolute energy glutton. It accounts for only 2% of your total body weight. Yet it constantly consumes 20% of your daily caloric intake just to keep you conscious. A primitive diet consisting purely of raw leaves, tough roots, and raw meat simply cannot provide enough energy. The math of raw foraging does not support the immense caloric demands of human cognition. How many raw carrots and celery sticks would you have to eat to power your complex thoughts for a single day? You would have to eat almost constantly from sunrise to sunset. There are only so many hours of daylight available for foraging, gathering, and endlessly chewing. You would eventually hit a strict biological wall where you simply run out of time to extract enough calories. Cooking demolished this invisible evolutionary barrier. It unlocked a massive, easily accessible surplus of pure energy from the exact same physical landscape. Was this the exact turning point where human intelligence truly ignited and left the animal kingdom behind? You can find the physical scars of this monumental transition buried deep in the ground. The Wonderwork Cave in South Africa holds a crucial and undeniable piece of this evolutionary puzzle. Archaeologists carefully excavating this massive site found microscopic traces of wood ash and deeply burned animal bones. These burned remnants were found securely deposited in undisturbed soil layers dating back 1 million years. Who was intentionally keeping the heavy darkness at bay in that ancient, echoing cave? The ancient ash was definitely not from a natural, unpredictable wildfire sweeping across the plains. The specific distribution of the burn material strongly suggests localized, carefully controlled hearths placed deep inside the cave system. The animal bones showed distinct burn marks completely consistent with being deliberately heated over open, controlled flames. Your ancestors were not just passively surviving the harsh savanna, they were actively modifying their environment to process biological fuel. Can you imagine the profound shift in daily life when the sun going down no longer meant the end of the day? Cooking is absolutely not just a modern convenience. It is a permanent, inescapable evolutionary trap. Once your ancestors started eating soft, cooked food, their bodies adapted rapidly to this new, high-energy diet. The incredibly expensive tissue of a massive digestive tract was permanently traded for the expensive tissue of a massive brain. You physically cannot go back to the natural diet of a wild chimpanzee. What exactly happens if a modern human stubbornly tries to live entirely on a diet of raw, wild food? A highly revealing study by nutritionist Karina Kobnik rigorously examined this exact modern scenario. She studied modern, urban populations who were actively attempting to live on strict, unheated raw food diets. These people had full access to highly bred, visually perfect, and nutrient-dense modern agricultural produce from grocery stores. The physiological results of this dietary experiment were striking and frankly quite dangerous for the participants. Many of the individuals suffered from severe, chronic energy deficiency despite eating constantly. Why does your highly advanced modern body struggle so much with the supposedly natural state of raw food? The human body simply cannot break down raw cell walls efficiently enough to extract the necessary daily calories. Almost half of the women in the raw food study experienced a condition called amenorrhea. Their bodies literally shut down core reproductive functions because they could not extract enough energy to safely sustain a pregnancy. This physiological shutdown happened despite them consuming extremely large volumes of plant matter every single day. Your digestive system has permanently outsourced its hardest, most demanding work to the heat of the campfire. Are you entirely dependent on a primitive piece of external technology just to fuel your basic biology? Harvard evolutionary biologist Rachel Carmody provided the absolute biological proof for this deep human dependency. She carefully fed different groups of laboratory mice identical measured diets of meat and sweet potatoes. One group received the food completely raw, while the other group received the exact same food heavily cooked. The mice eating the cooked food gained healthy weight and thrived in their enclosures. The mice eating the exact same caloric amount of raw food rapidly lost weight and began to starve. How can identical calories theoretically yield such drastically different physical results inside the living body? The answer lies strictly in the microscopic mechanics of human digestion. When you eat a raw sweet potato, much of the complex starch passes entirely through your small intestine completely undigested. It is simply too dense and tightly packed for your internal biological enzymes to break apart and absorb. Cooking physically gelatinizes the starch, turning a rigid crystalline structure into a soft, highly accessible nutritional matrix. Your body spends far less internal energy digesting the meal, leaving a massive surplus of calories for your brain. Have you ever considered that the act of cooking is basically just an advanced form of predigestion? This monumental shift completely changed how your ancient ancestors spent their precious time. A wild chimpanzee is effectively trapped and enslaved by its own low-quality diet. It must spend the vast majority of its daylight hours finding, gathering, and endlessly chewing raw food. Homo erectus, securely armed with a blazing campfire, suddenly found themselves with vast amounts of completely free time. Cooking efficiently condensed many hours of tedious chewing into a highly concentrated, rapidly consumed meal. What did your restless ancestors do with all of those newly liberated daylight hours? They used that unprecedented free time to hunt larger prey, track animal movements, and invent complex physical tools. They used that time to coordinate massive groups and slowly migrate across entire vast continents. The warm campfire became the absolute center of all human existence and survival. It actively provided vital warmth, crucial protection from nocturnal predators, and a completely new social dynamic. Did the simple physical act of gathering around the flickering flames fundamentally shape the modern human mind? Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent many long decades intimately studying the Juhoansi Bushmen of the harsh Kalahari Desert. She observed a very distinct and measurable difference between their daytime conversations and their nighttime conversations. During the hot day, the talk was purely practical, focusing heavily on economic tasks and minor social complaints. At night, gathered closely around the fire, the entire tone and subject of the conversation completely shifted. The heavy darkness and the dancing flames naturally drew the small community intimately together. Why does a crackling fire so naturally invite the telling of complex stories and myths? Wiesner carefully documented that nighttime fire conversations were overwhelmingly dominated by stories, cultural myths, and the sharing of vital knowledge. The campfire artificially extended the usable day, safely providing a protected space for abstract thought and deep social bonding. This shared, illuminated imagination is the absolute foundation of all complex human culture and society. Cooking did not just physically build your larger brain, it gave you the safe social environment to actually use it. Could human society as we understand it even exist without the ritual of a shared, cooked meal? Agriculture is very often viewed as the single greatest turning point in all of human history. We constantly celebrate the domestication of golden wheat and the rapid building of the first massive stone cities. But agriculture is a very recent, almost modern invention, appearing only 10,000 brief years ago. For hundreds of thousands of long, dark years before the very first farm was ever planted, the hearth was your true home. You are a biological artifact constructed entirely by the mastery of the flame. Have you forgotten how deeply the need for the fire is written into your very DNA? Think very carefully about your modern, everyday relationship with the food you constantly consume. You are currently surrounded by an endless sea of highly engineered, ultra-processed modern meals. These artificial foods are essentially hyper-cooked, broken down so completely that your body barely has to work to absorb them. This is the exact identical mechanism that once saved your starving ancestors from extinction on the harsh savanna. Now, it is directly causing a massive global health crisis of severe obesity and complex metabolic disease. Is your body simply doing exactly what it evolved to do, but doing it far too well for your own modern good? You strongly crave soft, highly calorie-dense foods simply because your ancient ancestors survived by frantically finding them. Your body is constantly and desperately expecting long periods of brutal famine that simply no longer arrive. The very same biological adaptation that gave you a massive brain and conquered the globe is now a severe liability. You live in a strange, unprecedented modern world of absolute and endless nutritional abundance. The ancient campfire that painstakingly built your body is now a humming microwave that rapidly overfeeds you. You take a bite of a soft, warm meal, effortlessly absorbing the concentrated energy that once took a savanna to forge. You take a bite of a raw tuber,